mistakes that Warzone players make. Regardless of your skill level, I promise you'll find at least one of these helpful. Yes, even the pros might not know a couple of these. First and foremost, your settings, which arguably are the most important thing out of all of these. I'm gonna go over a couple of these that I believe to be are the most important. So first, let's go over to your settings, go to your graphic settings, then hit R1 twice, and then go over to the view. Here, I want you to go down to FOV, and I want you to put that anywhere between 110 to 120 if you are playing Warzone. Make sure your ADS field of view is set to affected, and make sure your weapon field of view is set to wide, and your vehicle field of view is set to wide. Then lastly, scroll all the way down and make sure your first person camera movement is set to least 50%. These settings are gonna make sure that you have the least amount of visual recoil. Visual recoil is pretty much whenever you're shooting a gun and how much that gun shakes. Surprisingly, a lot of that depends on your FOV and what you have these settings set to. So I would highly recommend to change that. Next, I want you guys to change your dead zones. So first, go over to your controller settings, scroll all the way down to where it says dead zones. Go ahead and click square. Now this is where the important part is. The left trigger and the right trigger don't really matter too much. The right stick, I want you to put that to 99 max. The right stick minimum. This one, I don't want you to go over 5%. For me, I put mine at 2, always, always, always. Now, the thing that is the most important here is the left stick maximum. What this pretty much does is makes it to where you don't have to move your stick that much for it to activate full auto tac sprint. I know a lot of people are getting dead slides, and a big part of it is because they don't have this setting on. Then left stick minimum, I have that at 0. But the most important one here is the left stick maximum. For the next setting, make sure you have the right aiming settings. I've said this multiple times, and I will die on this hill. Anywhere from 6 to 8 cents is the perfect sense. You can go higher if you want, but the best players in the world play anywhere from 6 cents to 8 cents. Anything outside of that, you're just decreasing your accuracy. Now, if you're playing multiplayer, senses are a little bit different. For Black Ops 6 multiplayer, if you play on 6.6 on Warzone, turn that up to 7.7. But for Warzone, sensitivities do feel different. So for me, I play on 6.6 on Warzone, and if I go and play Black Ops 6 multiplayer, I turn that to 1 up, which is 7.7. Another setting that I think is really important is if you don't have trigger stops or smart triggers, I would try to swap your L2 with your L1 and your R2 with your R1. This is gonna make it to where you have less travel time when activating those buttons. For sensitivity multiplier, if you are on 8.8 or 7.7, you could turn down your ADS sensitivity multiplier to, let's say, about 0.9 or 0.8, depending on what you like. This is only here if you feel like you're missing too many shots on 6 or even 8 cents. But arguably the most important setting here is make sure you go to your aim response curve and set that to dynamic. Guys, please don't listen to anybody telling you to go to linear. And then go ahead and click square on aim response curve, and your aim response curve slope scale, I put that just to 1. For the next set of settings, let's make sure that you have your movement settings perfect so you can be a little movement demon. For this setting, I want you to turn on your tactical sprint assist. From here, I want you to click square and make sure you have your sprint assist delay set to 0. Sprint assist sideways, I have it on, and sprint assist backwards, I have it on. Mantle assist, I have that off. Crouch assist, I have that off. And corner slicing, which is different to this game, I personally have it off. What corner slicing pretty much does is it makes it to where whenever you're about to get around a corner, your gun kind of turns sideways. Now, this is not that bad if you're using a red dot or some type of scope, but when you're using iron sights, it does throw me off, so I personally turn it off. The next big one is make sure you are on hybrid slide and dive behavior. This is gonna make it to where you have tap to slide and also tap to dive. I promise you, do not play in anything other than this. Anybody telling you otherwise, they are faded. Especially when it comes to Warzone, you need to be able to instantly dive and instantly slide whenever you need to. Now, after you're done with that, I want you to go to your combat section, scroll all the way down to combat advanced settings. Here, there's a couple big ones that I want you to know. So one is make sure your interact behavior is set to prioritize interact. That's gonna make it to where whenever you're picking up guns or opening up a chest, it's instant. Then lastly, in my opinion, the most important setting out of all of these is make sure you have your sprint cancels reload set to off. This is a big reason why a lot of people feel like they can't run and reload at the same time. It's because this setting is set to on by default. Turn this off and it's gonna feel way, way better. Now, the next mistake, which I promise you a lot of people don't know about this, is your HUD changes. This one's a little bit weird, so bear with me. For whatever reason, they made it to where you can't do this in Warzone, but you can kind of trick the system by going into multiplayer. So first and foremost, I want you to go into multiplayer. After your multiplayer, I want you to go to your settings, head over to your interface here. From there, I want you to go to your gameplay HUD. Now, go to your HUD presets and then go all the way down and put magnified HUD. What this is gonna do is make your HUD a lot bigger, and it's gonna make it to where you can see a lot more in your HUD whenever you're playing Warzone. Now, after you've done that, hit R1 and I want you to go down to scale. Make sure to turn this all the way up to 150. This pretty much makes it to where it's as zoomed in as possible and it looks really, really clean on screen. Then after you're done with that, scroll down to the icon scale and I want you to set this to 75. This is gonna make it to where all those bounty contracts and everything on the minimap is a lot smaller so you can see see enemies if they are firing. Now we can head back to Warzone, and I want you to go into interface as well for there. Then you're gonna go to your gameplay HUD, and I want you to scroll all the way down to where it says score feed. One of the biggest things that I've noticed with this game is that there's too much visual clutter on your screen whenever you're playing the game. Whenever you get a knock or whenever you're doing things, there's so many numbers that pop up on screen where you can't even see where you're shooting. So for me, I put my score feed down to 30% opacity to where I can still see what's going on, but I can focus on the enemies in front of me. Moving on to the next tip is that players don't know how to utilize their loadout efficiently. Most people just go ahead and get overkill and then call it a day. But there's a couple tips and tricks here that I can show you that are gonna make things a lot better for you. First and foremost is having a loadout for each individual scenario. For example, everybody should have a gunfighter AR and then some type of overkill class. What I normally do every single game is I buy my gun off rip with 5 attachments. When it comes to your loadout, specifically the AR, it's very important that you have gunfighter equipped on this. The reason being is that the ARs in this game are not the greatest and they do need a lot of attachments to make them viable. Now, when it comes to the SMGs, you don't really need to do that. A 5 attachment SMG is really good. So what I normally do off rip is I buy my sub for 2,500 in the buy station, and then whenever my loadout comes, I go ahead and buy my gunfighter AR. That way, when the loadout drops, I already have my secondary gun. Now, if you did this the opposite, where you went and you bought your gunfighter AR, the gunfighter AR will cost $6,000. So if you do it this way, you're spending 2.5 the amount of money that you need to. But let's try a different scenario where you have your loadout, but you have no money. What I do is I normally have my sub first and my secondary AR with only 5 attachments. So to kind of recap, these are the 3 most important things to have. One is your gunfighter AR, because ARs are not the greatest in this game. Second, and in my opinion, the most important thing here is to have your meta sub as a 5 attachment sub. Then the third class you should 1000% have is an overkill class with a 5 attachment AR of your choice. These are the most basic loadouts and will cover possibly every single scenario that you ever possibly get into. And if you really want to get spicy, if you do have that extra money, you can go ahead and throw in a gunfighter sub as well. While we're here in the loadout section, I want you to scroll down to your perks. For the perks, I honestly thought they were going to be a lot better than they actually are, but a lot of these are not that great. But in my opinion, I am running Survivor, Quick Fix, and Tempered. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen is a lot of people are rocking Dexterity. Jay got put up a video recently and pretty much said that Dexterity doesn't do anything. The extra fall damage range that you get is not worth it. It's literally only like 3 meters. And the weapon motion that you get while jumping, sliding, and diving is not that drastic to even be usable. So make sure you guys use Survivor. This one helps you regen incredibly fast, and honestly, I really like this. This is the meta perk. After that, I rock Quick Fix. The reason being is because I can play with one hand and shoot with the other. Now, Quick Fix is bugged at the moment. Whenever you get a knock, it doesn't heal, and sometimes even when you get a full kill, it doesn't heal you. I'm hoping that they address this very soon. And then lastly, I rock Tempered just because the more health you have, the higher probability you are to win your gunfights. Moving on to the next big tip, which I did address a little bit, but it's buying your guns, but doing it smart. Most people don't know this secret tip, but gun prices change depending on how many attachments you have on them. Yes, that does mean that 5 attachment gun is going to be differently priced than a 6 attachment or even a 7 attachment gun. Make sure you're utilizing this to the best of your abilities. For example, if you have a 5 attachment gun, that costs $2,500. Then after your 5 attachment guns, every attachment that you add is an extra $500. For example, if you have a 6 attachment gun, that then turns into a $3,000 gun, then 7, 8 attachment, etc., etc. I will add here that sometimes this does bug out. For example, I used a blueprint gun today with only 6 attachments and it charged me 3.5K. So I would play around with your loadout and utilize your guns efficiently. The biggest thing of this tip is to make sure that you're buying your guns. If you have your loadout, make sure to grab your gunfighter loadout and then go in and just buy a gun in the buy station. For the next tip, and I do want to shout out my man Swag because he did show me this is how you can get your loadout very quickly. If you and your teammates all land on this building in a reactor, you and your teammates get a supply UAV. What this is going to do is going to show you wherever there's loadout crates around the map. So whenever you pick that up and it does ping, you can go ahead and see any red boxes on your minimap. As soon as you see those loadout boxes on your minimap, that indicates that it is your loadout supply crate. So in about 30 seconds, you can get your loadout if you are lucky. Sometimes these loadout crates spawn close to you and sometimes they don't. Now the next tip is making sure you do not get tunnel vision in gunfights. Audio is pretty bad in this game, so using your minimap is going to be very important. I'm going to say this once. Please do not chase. One tip that I can honestly say that is constantly getting a lot of people killed is chasing your kills. If you ever watch pros like Shotzi or Diaz Biffle play, a lot of them are very patient, which makes them incredibly hard to kill. If they're in a gunfight and they get somebody weak and that player ends up getting away, they normally don't chase it unless they absolutely have to. A lot of players, I think, can make a big drastic improvement to their gameplay by just not simply tunnel visioning. I'm telling you right now, your minimap is king. When you watch a lot of these streamers, a lot of them are constantly looking up like this. And you're gonna get those comments comments saying, oh, why are you looking at your second monitor? But what they're actually doing is they're constantly looking at their minimap to get information. The minimap is there for a reason, and it's not just there to be used once every game. Honestly, you should be looking at your minimap more than you're looking in front of you. Whenever you full kill somebody, make sure you're constantly looking at the minimap to see where their enemies are. Because in Resurgence, whenever you get a full kill, their teammates do ping. Always, always, always make sure you're focusing on your positioning. Make sure if you have a head glitch in front of you, use it. Don't get an ego and try to go crazy, TikTok YY360. Focus on your positioning, and that is what makes incredible players. For this next tip, and I do want to reiterate, this is only meant for the end game, is make sure you are utilizing your money efficiently. And what I mean by that is buy specialist. I'm not too sure if the money is bugged in the game or not, but right now you get an insane amount of money on Rebirth and even on Area 99. There's a lot of times in Endgame where I literally have $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Right now, you can buy specialists for $30,000. But in the endgame, there is a fire sale that reduces that from $30,000 to $21,000. So if you do happen to have money, make sure to utilize that because specialist is broken. For those of y'all that don't know what specialist is, it pretty much gives you every single perk in the game. And as of right now, there is 20 perks. I promise you, you are going to feel invincible if you have this. On top of that, make sure if you are going to end games, you're utilizing your UAVs to rotate and buying airstrikes to help isolate the enemies and make sure that they cannot tunnel you. And what I mean by that is imagine if you're getting held behind the gas and there's an enemy in front of you that has a clear sight on you. What you can do is make sure you have some type of cluster strike or an airstrike. This is going to allow you to give you just a little bit of seconds to rotate. You can airstrike the enemy in front of you. This is going to make them no longer look at you. It's going to allow you to be able to rotate just a little bit easier. I'm telling you, having some type of streaks in the end game is so important because I promise you, if you are late rotating, people will hold you in the gas. And lastly, for my final tip is power position is king. In competitive Warzone, we call this win con. So I want you to imagine that you're in the final 2 to 3 circles. What I want you to get into the habit of doing is every single time you're in endgame, I want you to pull up your minimap and see where do I have the highest probability of winning the game. That is what we call win condition. I'm going to utilize this clip as an example. We're in the end game and it's myself and FIFA kills. Right here, FIFA drops a portable redeploy and we know that this building right in front of us, this water tower, is win position. Right here, the only way that they kill us is if they have an airstrike, but we have high ground and it's going to be a lot harder for them to kill us through here. As you can see, I airstrike the enemy so that way we are not able to get airstriked. What this position allowed us to do is pretty much not get focused. This right here was the win condition. Now, I will say this particular case was crazy and we were just betting that nobody had an airstrike, which we did get airstrike, but we were able to make it out of here. From here, we had the perfect angle where we were able to shoot so many players and get so many kills here. All that to say is constantly make sure you're looking at your minimap and make sure you're focusing on your positioning. Positioning is king and it's incredibly important that you constantly are aware of it. Being at the low ground, you significantly decrease your chances of winning. So make it a habit to always bring up your minimap and tell yourself, where do I have the highest chances of winning this game? That is what we call win con.